Hitchhiker Slayer, featuring Thor Christiansen. Full name Thor Nis Christiansen. Crimes and Sprees. Thor Christiansen was a Danish-American serial killer who killed and took the lives of 4 females in Santa Barbara, California. Whenever Thor Christiansen would commit his murder spree, he would drive around with his vehicle while having a .22 caliber pistol hidden near his hand. Thor would then find a female who was a hitchhiker, then offer to ride for them. Once if the victim or the female was inside the vehicle, he would shoot them in the head with his weapon, which the weapon was stolen, by the way. After murders, Thor Christiansen would engage in necrophilia, along with assaulting the victim's corpse. Then Thor would dump their bodies in isolated areas such as canyons and ditches. Other than Santa Barbara area, Thor Christiansen would operate in Los Angeles County. However, on April of 1979, the middle of the month, Thor would pick up 22-year-old Lydia Preston, whom she would survive from his pickup and attempt a rampage. Overall, the murders of the case of Thor Christiansen involved a direct target and even hate towards females. Investigation. The investigation for the case of Thor Nis Christiansen had a lot of sloppy mistakes from the police, along with a community panic in Santa Barbara, and a complete lack of potential suspects. On February of 1977, just after Thor Christiansen murdered his first 3 victims, he would be detained by the police. Specifically, he was involved with investigators due to the fact he had possession of alcohol in inappropriate ways. In addition, the police would discover a .22 caliber, however they dismissed it and let him go, leading to him committing at least one more murder. At least known murder. Students in Santa Barbara began to fear for the sakes of their safety due to the fact the police was not able to catch the suspect, let alone the Hitchhiker Slayer or the serial killer for the missing females. The police would now mark the case of Hitchhiker Slayer as a cold case. However, that would change one day when they would receive a report from a female named Lydia Preston. Lydia reported to spot Thor Christiansen at the Bottom Line Bar in Hollywood, California. The police would then arrest Thor for at least the reported assault before discovering more disturbing truths about Thor Christiansen. Santa Barbara homicide detectives would then connect the similarities between the victims and Lydia. Then, as they found the bodies in the canyon, they would discover fingerprints that matched Thor Christiansen's. Trial and court proceedings. Thor Christiansen would not have a trial due to the fact there was an overwhelming amount of evidences. Those evidences proved significantly that Thor Christiansen was the serial killer responsible for the killings, leading to him pleading guilty for the fact that he murdered someone in an instant without any arguments back. The court was about whether Thor Christiansen committed the murders with sanity or insanity due to the records of his mental state. Thor himself would tell his lawyers and attorneys to plead not guilty for the reason of insanity. There was a psychiatric evaluation orders from the court. The result of the evaluation proved Thor Christiansen had killed for hate. In addition, he would state that he was often bullied by females around him due to his overweighted size. However, eventually the defense would abandon the not guilty of insanity defense. Therefore, it led to Thor Christiansen pleading guilty, which spared the victims' families from having to testify. Ultimately, due to the fact California's laws had banned death penalty, the judge would sentence Thor Christiansen to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole in Folsom State Prison. Childhood. Thor Christiansen's childhood different from the other killers and from recent episodes. For his case, it was marked by domestic abuse and early red flag signs on him becoming psychologically unstable. It was reported the family of Thor Christiansen had a Danish background, along with Thor himself being born in Denmark. His family would relocate their homes from Denmark to Inglewood, California at first. However, they would settle in Solvang, a Danish-themed tourist town in once again California. The father of Thor Christiansen had owned a local restaurant in the town of Solvang. However, records had overwhelmingly noted the father was heavily abusive to Thor physically, and he was severely and a brutal alcoholic. From a young age, Thor Christiansen would engage in brutally assaulting and abusing animals around, with severely dangerous and torturous methods. His parents seem to have either not noticed or not caring about the behavior of Thor Christiansen. Anyways, academic-wise, at first, Thor Christiansen was considered to be a good student who focused a lot on his academics. In addition, peers around him would describe him as a positive, kind, and gentle student. In other words, Thor Christiansen at first was considered to be a normal student, a contrasting personality in his future years. Childhood, Part 2. Conditions for Thor Christiansen began to change when he turned into his junior year of high school, along with the years after his high school years, which turns into his serial killer years. Thor Christiansen, upon beginning his junior year of high school, his behavior would significantly decline. In other words, or basic words, he would have a negative and outburst-like behaviors. The negative behaviors would include severely abusement of drugs, neglecting. Matter of fact, he would ignore his schoolwork and skip classes. It was reported from his friend he began to push his friends and bully them himself. Ever since he was a child, Thor Christiansen was considered to be a chubby boy, who at age 17 he would already weigh 200 pounds. Eventually, in later future years, he would weigh 275 pounds. Reportedly, girls would reject him, taunt him for having an overweight condition. Even before his junior year, it was reported he would get severely bullied often, especially from females. Overall, the childhood of Thor Christiansen involved an unstable condition along with a growing negative psychological factor in hate. Personal life, potentially affecting their crimes and acts. Before Thor Christiansen would start his first years with murder at age 19, he would abandon his life in California, and in fact he would move to Oregon State briefly by driving there with his vehicle. During his brief life there, he would focus on self-improvement, including losing some weight. In addition, he would even go back to high school and properly receive a high school diploma at a junior college. There was a source that said Thor had a girlfriend during the murder spree. However, it is unknown and not proven. Thor Christiansen, when enrolling to the junior college, it led him to move back to Santa Barbara, California and Isla Vista, which led to both settings becoming his killing ground in a short amount of time. Pivotal events. Thor Nis Christiansen was born on the 28th of December, 1957 in Denmark. From the year of 1974 to the year of 1975, his behaviors and life would twist into the negatives. From November of 1976 to January of 1977, at aged 18 to 19 years old, he would begin his murder spree, leading to 3 individuals losing their lives. On February of 1977, the police would detain Thor Christiansen before letting him go. In the early year of 1979, Thor Christiansen would relocate himself in Santa Barbara. On April 18, 1979, Lydia Preston would survive the attack from Thor Christiansen. On July 11, 1979, Thor Christiansen was arrested at a Hollywood bar. Quotes from Thor Nis Christiansen. "I do not want to open that trunk. Fine, I'll open the damn trunk. I gotta clean this trunk every day. It's better to clean this crap. Lol. Look, I'm insane, but I cannot prove it. I would shoot them in the head and then have sex with bodies. You have to help me from the cops. Those girls deserve it." Those girls made fun of me. They deserve to die. Don't worry, I won't stab you with a pencil. Forensic inferences. The killings of Thor Nis Christiansen is a combination of factors. Like the other serial killer cases, it was likely a combination of hate, rage, abuse, the psychological red flags, and temper altogether. In other words, it was a negative combination that led to his killings. Thor Christiansen may have felt a sense of hurt, but likely from the abuse of his father, he felt and grew a sense of temper and a sense of aggression, which, in other words, he learned aggression from his father. Thor himself likely knew the difference between what was right and what was not right, in other words, what was wrong. However, the aggression connected to the red flags and the sexual desires. The rejection and likely the bullying from the girls had fueled his aggression and desires. It's just like the theme of violence being added to his desires, leading to him becoming more aggressive. Tragically and likely, when committing with abusement towards animals, Thor Christiansen would likely imagine what would happen if those animals were instead the girls who bullied him. While not he may have felt a sense of relief and enjoyment, but also commitment and wanting to act on those unfortunate desires. It's highly likely he felt a sense of shame towards his own body because of his large frame, along with the weight conditions that led to the bullying from the girls around. Rather than characterizing from the abuse of childhood, the killings were likely more related to the hate towards females, though Thor Christiansen would likely reflect on the aggression throughout his life to have a full-on urge to act aggressive during the murders. Legacy and impact. The case of Thor Nis Christiansen ended the hippie era in at least the town of Isla Vista, California. College students began to fear hitchhiking because of the case of Thor Christiansen in at least the Isla Vista, once again, California. The population of those who hitchhiked began to decrease significantly. Isla Vista began to create laws related to protecting females from violence that, such as Thor Christiansen created and contributed to. The University of California began to advance their transportation system. The case of Thor Christiansen showed failure within the police along with the security in the prison. Till this day, students, certain people at least, still carry the heavy weight from the case of Thor Christiansen.